Deep within the northern stone quarries of Aswan, Egypt, lies a sleeping giant that was never meant to remain in the earth. This is the unfinished obelisk, a single, massive block of red granite that represents one of the most profound examples of ancient ambition ever attempted. If it had been raised, it would have stood 42 meters high, nearly 137 feet into the Egyptian sky. But it's not just the height that baffles modern engineers, it's the weight. We're looking at nearly 1,200 tons of solid stone. To put that into perspective, this single monument is heavier than 200 adult African elephants combined. In today's world, moving such a weight would require the most advanced NASA-level crawler transporters or a fleet of heavy-duty industrial cranes. Yet, 3,500 years ago, during the 18th dynasty, Queen Hatshepsut likely gave the order to carve this behemoth directly out of the bedrock. Her vision was to create a monument that would dwarf every other obelisk in the world. These towering structures were known as tekenu, literally meaning to pierce the sky. They were sacred bridges, petrified sunbeams of the god Ra, meant to stand at the entrances of temples like Karnak to establish a direct link between the pharaoh and the heavens. But as we stand over this abandoned giant today, we are forced to ask, how? How did a civilization with no iron tools, no modern engines, and no advanced lifting gear even dream of such a feat? Was it mere primitive labor, or are we looking at a lost chapter of high technology that history has forgotten?
Mainstream archaeology, following the studies of Reginald Engelbach in 1922, tells us a story of slow, painful labor. The theory is that thousands of workers sat around this stone for years, using dolerite pounding balls to laboriously pulverize the granite. Dolerite is a volcanic stone, slightly harder than granite, and the idea is that by hitting the rock repeatedly, you could slowly wear it away. However, when you apply modern forensic engineering to this theory, the logic begins to crumble. Calculations show that a single worker could only remove about 5 to 10 cubic centimeters of granite per hour using this method. For a project of this scale, it would have taken decades of non-stop 24-hour labor just to dig the trenches. But look at the evidence left in the stone. These are not the marks of jagged hammering. These are scoop marks. If you look at the trenches surrounding the obelisk, you see rhythmic U-shaped indentations that look as if a giant machine moved through the solid rock like it was soft clay or butter. The walls are smooth. The curves are precise. This has led to a controversial vertical logic. Could the ancient Egyptians have used vibrational or acoustic technology? We know that granite is rich in quartz crystals. If you subject quartz to specific frequencies, its molecular bonds can be manipulated. Did they use sonic tools that allowed them to literally scoop the granite out of the ground with zero error? The marks left behind aren't primitive, they are mechanical.
But why this obsession with a single massive piece of stone? Why not build an obelisk in sections, which would have been infinitely easier to transport? The answer lies in the unique property of the stone itself, red Aswan granite. This granite is not just a building material, it is a high-concentration quartz crystal resonator. Modern science tells us about the piezoelectric effect. When quartz is put under immense mechanical stress, it generates an electric charge. Now, imagine 1,200 tons of that crystal-heavy granite standing upright under the constant pressure of its own weight. To the Egyptians, this wasn't just art, it was a living, vibrating antenna. The top of the obelisk, the pyramidion, was often sheathed in electrum, a natural conductor made of gold and silver. This served as the Benben stone, capturing the solar energy of Ra and potentially acting as a terminal for a wireless energy grid that we are only now beginning to theorize. Queen Hatshepsut likely commissioned this specific monolith to be the mother antenna of Karnak Temple. For this energy to flow correctly, the crystal structure had to be unbroken.
The obelisk had to be a monolith, a single continuous frequency carrier. If it were in pieces, the energy would dissipate at the joints. They weren't just carving stone, they were tuning a planet-scale instrument. The work had reached a critical stage. Thousands of workers had spent months, perhaps years, in the blistering heat of the Aswan quarry. The obelisk was almost fully detached from the bedrock. But then, in a single moment, the entire project turned into a nightmare. A deep structural crack appeared in the center of the 1,200-ton block. Forensic analysis today shows that this wasn't a minor surface scratch. It was a failure that went to the very core of the stone. In a monolith this size, a crack is a death sentence. If they had attempted to raise it, the structural tension would have caused the obelisk to shatter like glass, potentially causing a catastrophic explosion of granite shards that would have killed everyone nearby. The ancient engineers didn't give up immediately. We can see the ghost of a rescue plan on the stone today. They began cutting a smaller obelisk out of the remaining mass, trying to save at least some of the labor. But nature was unforgiving. Another crack appeared. They stopped. They didn't try to glue it. They didn't try to hide it with plaster. For the Egyptians, a flawed antenna was useless. They abandoned the 1,200-ton giant right where it lay, leaving us a forensic time capsule of their entire engineering process, unaltered for 3,500 years. Today, the unfinished obelisk stands, or rather lies, as the most important open-air museum in the world. It is more valuable to us today than a finished obelisk because it reveals the secrets of its birth. When we look at it with our 2026-era technology, our lasers and our drone scanners, we are still humbled. We have cranes that can lift 1,200 tons, but we don't have the audacity to carve it out of a single mountain with such rhythmic precision. The scoop marks and the abandoned trenches are a challenge to our modern understanding of history. They remind us that the primitive past was anything but primitive. The unfinished obelisk is a monument to the human spirit, to a civilization that reached for the stars, hit its limit, and was brave enough to leave its failure behind for us to learn from. The sleeping giant of Aswan is still speaking to us. The question is, are we finally ready to listen?